Welcome to Shelf Help, a channel dedicated to talking to the void about whatever book I happen to be reading. I am your host, the reader. The following review will contain spoilers. The words, "it's complicated," jump to mind. Oh boy, is it complicated. There are several races, but the two most relevant to the story are the humans and the Vannae. Humans were Vannae until they fell and lost their immortality. The two remaining Vannae races of importance here are the Mnol and the Krippis. The Mnol are dark in color and prefer assassin techniques. The Krippis are brightly colored and fight in military units. They spend a lot of time fighting each other until they join forces to fight the spreading human empire and its insatiable appetite for slaves. This is a bare-bone background. It's more complicated, but a lot of the stuff with the Vannae isn't super important just yet. It'll probably go deeper in the next book. As for the story proper, I'm going to start with the storytelling device. There are 3 narrators. The first is Corinne, the main character. He is currently held prisoner in a cell. The second is his guard Talon, a creature called a mimic. It can, well, mimic people. Not only can it read minds, but if it eats a victim's brain, it gains their whole memories. Talon has brought in a stone enchanted to record whatever the holder says. Corinne tells it where it can put that stone, but Talon informs him he can play its game or it will murder his parents and wear their skin as a coat. So he plays along. They pass the stone back and forth, switching off chapters. Talon tells the story up until Corinne's kidnapping and enslavement. Corinne tells what happens after that. The third narrator is Thurvashar, who is transcribing and adding footnotes. We'll get back to him. On the surface, this is a basic hero's journey. Corinne is a thief living in the slums of Core Capital. He is raised by his adopted musician father, Suradia, and a brothel madam, Ola. Ola also gets him into the Thieves' Guild, the Shadow Dancers, because of his innate magical ability. Through a series of events that involve human sacrifice and summoning a demon, Corinne discovers that he is in line for the head of one of the most powerful families, controlling both the healers and the Shadow Dancers. Okay, that's not technically true, but Corinne's family tree is complicated at best, and no one is being completely honest. The short version is that it involves 2 royal families, a booming slave trade, a couple of gods, and a magic rock that can perform body swaps. Said magic rock is the Stone Shackles. It's one of a set of 8. As a side note, there are 8 immortal gods. I'm sure there is absolutely no connection there that will greatly affect the story going forward. Nope. None. The Stone Shackles' main ability is to warn its wearer of danger, keep them alive at any cost, and switch the souls of the wearer with the soul of their murderer. It can also only be taken off by the wearer of their own free will, or if the wearer is dead. Corinne has had it all his life, but he isn't the first owner. It's a family heirloom of sorts, just not from his human side. Corinne hates his new family for many, many good reasons, but when he attempts to run away, he is instead kidnapped and sold into slavery by Talon, while disguised as his childhood nemesis. While enslaved, Corinne is put under a gaish, a witch, using the help of a demon, cuts off a piece of his soul and stores it in a trinket. Anyone holding the trinket can give him an order that must be obeyed under penalty of very painful death. When he goes on the auction block, he finds himself the object of a bidding war between a group called the Black Brotherhood and a man, Rolos Var. The Brotherhood wins, buying him for an exorbitant price. Why are these two in an all-out bidding war for a street rat turned prince turned slave? That goes into the multiple gods portion of his heritage, which doesn't go far in this book, but I suspect it will be covered more in the next one, so I'm not going to worry about it just yet. The Black Brotherhood are the cult of Thenya, the goddess of death. Win the bid and take him to a private island, where, largely because he's trapped by a dragon who wants to make him part of his singing rock garden, he's been several years in training. Now it's time to go home and settle scores. The majority of this book is told in flashback by Corinne and Talon, with only the climax being told as it unfolds. Corinne has amazing luck, to the point I would call bullshit in most books, but that's subverted here by the fact that he is a disciple of the goddess of luck, Taja, to the point that he speaks with her on 2 occasions, and that's saying nothing for the other gods he meets. Corinne is pretty standard main character for this kind of book. He starts as a street kid, living by his wits, though he has a home and with adoptive parents, so he's not on the street fighting with mongrel dogs for scraps and sleeping in garbage. But there is something decidedly off about it. Ola, his mother figure, is a former slave of his biological father. She bought her freedom with a necklace of very rare jewels, then set up her own slave brothel. She's been sheltering Corinne since she took him as a baby from a friend who was trying to sneak him out of the Blue Palace when said friend was murdered by Talon. His father figure, Serdia, is a blind musician with green eyes, implying he may have some connection to one of the god-touched highborn families. He also has a ring with a griffin on it. A lot of high-ranking, important people have very similar rings. Incidentally, when Talon decides not to kill Ola, she does mention that it would have been better if she hid Corinne far from the capital and his family, but she appears to be under a spell. And later in the story, Corinne uses music to cast a spell. Curiouser and curiouser. But again, this seems to be a thread picked up in future books. Speaking of Talon, it is the most fluid character I've read about in a long time. When Corinne first meets it is very angry. And as the story goes on, it becomes almost friendly-ish. Talon works for Darzan, who works for Gadrith, who wants the stone shackles that Corinne needs to give up willingly. But it's Talon who sells Corinne into slavery while in the guise of his childhood nemesis. Its actions stall the plans of its bosses for years. Interestingly, I think this was a backup plan. When Talon helps capture Corinne for Darzan, it takes Ola hostage for itself. The next time Corinne sees the brothel madam, it's when his childhood nemesis chases him and his half-brother into a massage parlor. Ola has lost a lot of weight and claims she can get Corinne out of the city. At the appointed meeting, however, the meeting goes sideways and Ola is killed. Talon, who was posing as a slave, speaks to her sweetly, assures Ola they will be together forever. She just has to go do one thing first: sell Corinne into slavery. And yet at the end, though it's still keeping him prisoner for Darzan and Gadrith, it says that Ola, and Sardinia have come to understanding. It wants him to be safe. Then guards the door while his bosses kill him to summon a demon. So fluid in motives due to many, many conflicting personalities. Still, it makes Talon one of the more interesting characters. There's definitely a dominant, malicious personality, but the others can also band together and lobby for different outcomes, which makes sense in its own way. Talon can't just look like Ola or whoever she's trying to impersonate. It needs all the memories and feelings behind them. Talon loves Corinne because several personalities in it love Corinne, and several of them also want him dead. It's of several thousand minds about everything. This brings us to Thurvashar. We actually don't meet him as a character until rather late in the story, and it's not immediately obvious that he was the one adding the footnotes. He's also one of the antagonists out to kill Corinne and steal the stone shackles. And I say antagonist because he's not working of his own free will. He's accomplished and very intelligent mage. In public, he is said to be the adoptive son of Gadrith, but in reality, he's a gauged slave. While he is working with Gadrith and Darzan, it's against his will. Like Corinne, he was gauged and must do as he's told or risk painful death. But like Corinne, he knows that the gauge is not absolute. While he must obey direct orders, he still has free will outside of those orders, and helps Corinne when and where he can. This includes warning him of a less than ideal hiding spot, and when ordered to kill him, trying to be merciful. There are elements of this story that I wonder about. Corinne's relationship with his biological family is one. Galen is his nephew, and is kind to him. He's also the one Corinne spends most of the time with. Galen is supposed to be reporting to Darzin, but it's never followed up on, so it's unclear if he ever passes on information, or what may have been passed on, if anything. And he clearly feels betrayed when Corinne leaves without him, though he doesn't know he was kidnapped. And based on later portions of the book, it is clear the two had connection, and Galen considers him a true friend. Yet, at the pivotal moment, Corinne swears he will let his whole family be sacrificed. But it isn't Galen's possible death that breaks him. It's Maya's, a character he spent next to no time with. Maya is his biological mother, with one hell of a caveat attached. First, she's a Gaist slave, and her entire personality is dictated by the orders she is under. She is not nearly as nice when those chains come off. Second, Maya isn't Maya. Her soul is that of an exiled Vane princess, Cariel, who was wearing the stone shackles when she was killed. Corinne knows both of these things, even if he doesn't know whose soul is in her body, so why is her possible death what breaks his will? Seriously, I really don't know. There were no scenes that they shared relationship building. She saves him from Darzin, gives him an anatomy book, and laughs at a joke. But when he returns to the capital after his time with the Black Brotherhood, he behaves as if she is the most important person in his life. Now, based on how the book ends, I suspect this is set up for the next book. It just doesn't feel authentic to me. I'm going to put this on my second shelf. It is a good story with an interesting storytelling device, but it feels like it's using a complicated history to plaster over a story that doesn't risk much. The cover says, "What if you weren't the hero?" But Corinne is the hero. He's not just the protagonist. He's literally setting out to kill Gadrith and Darzin to save the world because he can. Corinne is exactly the kind of hero I expect from this story. Thank you for your time. I know everyone's mileage will vary, so feel free to leave your thoughts.